What's up, Art? How you doing, man?
Yo, it's good. How you doing, man? It's been a while since I seen you last.
Yeah. I miss you, buddy. And I wish I still lived closer to the city. I'd have been seeing you
No,
all
but
a
it's
lot more.
okay. It's okay. Obviously we've been through some wars over here, but we're back. We're back, baby.
Hell yeah. So I got a million questions to ask you, but you know, I guess we're gonna start with what is FGCOS?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's pretty simple. So guys, it's not like reinventing the wheel. So don't think it's like anything crazy where it's like, oh my god, Art's creating like a whole new operating system. No. So basically, we've done a pretty good job like in this channel, other places, like talking about like basically like like how a tuned operating system. You even talked about it in your last article. You mentioned during the whole Capcom Cup thing that the difference between like a stock OS and like a highly tuned OS.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So basically, FGCOS is designed to drop people's latency and and helps up their content creation game and mitigates a lot of the problems that for tournaments right now that fighting game tournaments have. Obviously they have some configuration problems with setting up like on Windows, right? So just
Mhm.
like all the pre tweaks all in one package. So that's basically what FGCOS is.
Okay, so what is the root operating system?
Oh,
Linux,
oh
Windows?
yeah, it's gonna be Windows. Yeah, it's gonna be Windows. It's just a tweaked Windows. It's a highly tweaked Windows, like designed for tournaments. So it's nothing like too crazy.
So, how does one install it from a basic level? Is this an ISO that you're going to be distributing, and then people need to put in their Windows key? Do they need to install Windows first, and then they run this package over it to convert it?
Yeah, like I'm still trying to figure out the best way. For now, I'm just installing it to like top players myself while I figure out the best method of install. Like maybe executable might be the best way, where you get like your own package, your own Windows package, and then you just apply this on top of it and runs all the tweaks.
That's one way of doing it. The easier way is the far more expensive way, where you work with Microsoft to do custom embedded OS, which is, I
Yeah, I
mean,
wish.
15 years ago, more
Hmm.
than that. Like XP embedded was really hard, and then once 7 embedded started coming out, then it started to feel more like Windows. And
Hmm.
now, I mean, it's basically the same thing. There's even a neat little GUI that lets you design it. The problem with that, though, is then everybody would have to purchase a new Windows license.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah,
that's why I wouldn't. That's why I wasn't talking about doing the disk installer.
yeah.
Like USB installer. Like yeah, it'd probably be something that you should apply on Windows 10. That'd be nice. But it is nice to have all the tweaks in one place. Like I found that like when you have like a stock Windows installed, there's actually like so many things you need to disable, and especially for fighting game tournaments, it's like fighting game tournaments. Those need specific. I think those need specific Windows optimizations because that's like the only PC game where you're hot swapping multiple controllers
Mm.
on a PC setup, which can be annoying, obviously.
So I want to back up for a minute because I want to make sure that we don't lose anybody in this, because this is really important. But it's not as hard as people think, and it's
No, it's
more,
not. It's not.
but it's also more important than people think. And the best way I could describe this is late 2000s. Building Windows embedded images was a giant part of my job for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
And there was one point where we were trying to make very, very low powered hardware. Low powered because we needed to have low heat output because it had to be
Mhm.
sealed and fanless, which in 2023, it's like, who cares, asshole, get an iPad. But it was hard back then.
Yeah, it
So
was.
we needed to use super low powered stuff, but we still needed to distribute TV across the network and across TV tuners. So you basically needed to be decoding video, but at the lowest power hardware. And if we just loaded Windows 7 at the time, and or Media Center, or whatever, whichever one we were using,
Yeah, sure.
it would not do it. It would stutter, it would sputter. If you got, like, if you were watching TV and another message came through, it would really slow the computer down. But stripping the OS down to a point where everything was, you know, it only had what you needed.
Mhm.
Everything was smooth as butter, and it never really failed unless it was, a hardware failure or something. So
Mhm.
that same piece of hardware could do exactly what it was designed to do if you don't run all the other crap behind it. And obviously, Microsoft designs this. People love to shit on Windows, but it's one OS that works on basically everything.
Yo, Bob, you
And
did such a good explanation of it. Like, I was so I didn't know you did all that back in the day. I didn't know you were making custom
yeah,
installers. So you get it. It's like I didn't have to explain anything. You just explained it for me.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny the crap I used to do before I started doing retro RGB full time. Like if I had continued down that path, I would have been some rich fuck living in a big house. And now, now
Mm.
I put my face in the front of a T-shirt with my middle finger in it, but I'm having fun, so whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's very important, but it's not that hard. But you do need a little bit of IT stuff. Coincidentally, years ago, I wrote a guide on how to use Clonezilla to back up and restore your hard drives.
Mhm.
I actually did it paid work for another company, and I was like, the retro scene could use this, and this is not a competitor, so I put it on retrorgb.com. But that's the type of thing. So like, let's say you have a computer that's working totally fine. It's a Windows computer, everything's great, but you want this low lag thing. Invest in another hard drive. You don't need to, but what, a cheap SSD is like $40 now.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
basically what Bob's trying to say to Bob's trying to say to all like the laymen out there is that you don't, number one, you don't need good hardware to actually do this, and when we have a
Oh,
perfectly
we'll
tuned
get to
machine.
that. Don't worry. I'll be
Yeah, when
picking
you
your
have a
brain
perfectly
about
tuned
that.
machine, the great part is you get so many resources back. That's basically like a new machine.
Yeah.
And like it's hard to explain. It's basically like it's just this simple. If you're
Yeah.
using less of your CPU and GPU, obviously that frees up latency, right?
But to try this out without messing your stuff up,
Yeah.
get any hard drive, any SSD just to start,
Mhm.
and then use Clonezilla to clone your current drive to the new one, and then just unplug your other drive. Just unplug the power. So if anything goes wrong, you can just plug it back in and go back to the way it was. But then if you're running Windows 10 or 11, run the Windows reset so it erases everything and it starts from a fresh Windows install, and then run FGCOS installer over it. And
Yeah.
yes, technically you're cloning your Windows installation, which is technically gray area illegal, but you also are keeping it on the same machine. So one would argue that that's actually still legal. So whatever.
Yeah.
Microsoft is never coming after you for using two copies of Windows on the same set of hardware. You're
Well,
never going to get your chops
yeah,
busted for
exactly.
that.
That's why I was going towards like an installer because that way you just have a stock Windows OS and then you apply
Yeah,
this on top of it.
I wanted to take the time to fumble through all that though, just to paint the picture before we even go any farther. I don't want people getting 15 minutes into this and going, "But my computer's running perfect. I don't want to do all that." You don't have to. And
Yeah, you can
if you're
dual boot.
somebody
Yeah, you can dual boot.
that
Yeah,
trusts your BIOS boot, you could just hit F12 or whatever your key is and select which operating system to boot and whenever you start your computer. And if not, if you're a nerd with hardware trust issues like I have, you could just pop open the side of your computer and swap the SATA cable back and forth between whichever drive you want when you boot, and you never have to worry. It's so much easier than the sounds. You don't have to screw up your current rig.
yeah. People get so scared. Yeah, people get so scared by a couple of things. They're scared that's going to kill their rig.
Mm-hmm.
They're scared that like they're going to get compromised somehow, or like they're scared of the no latency life.
Yeah,
It's like one of
that's
the things.
funny. So now that we know that this is very important, but
Yeah,
also
tweaking is very
very
important.
easy.
Yeah.
Well,
Tweaking is very important. It's just that it is very easy, and you're right. It's just the thing is with FGC, like I said, they have specific needs, specific to offline tournaments. Of swapping controllers. Like
right.
for example, like there's common things. Like one of the common things, for example, if you don't have like a Brooks Wingman, shouts to them for their devices. If you don't have a Brooks Wingman plugged in, you plug in like a DualShock 5 controller. The wireless controller will steal the audio in Windows, for example. So you're playing a game and then it switches over to the wireless controller on the PS5, and then you have to exit out. So
And
so,
what
so
is a Brook Wingman for anybody who doesn't know?
so the Brook Wingman is basically a direct input to X input adapter for PC, right? So plug it in, it shows up as an Xbox 360 controller, and it translates all controllers like from direct input to X input. So this means Xbox and PS3, PS4 controllers, PS5 controllers. So
Okay.
like so a ton of random PCBs work on it. I'd say like so we did a tournament using only the Brooks Wingmans, and I would say about 98% of the PCBs worked. There were some edge cases where PCBs didn't work, but it was fine.
Okay.
Yeah, like it's not 100%, but it's pretty darn close. I'm very surprised by how well the controller support is on the Brook Wingmans, and considering that it translates direct input over to X input, that means that every game is in Xbox mode, and by doing that, you don't have to restart a lot of these games. You have to
So
restart. There's no sound
that
ceiling.
is the one thing that I don't think, and I mean this with
That's
love
so
and
important.
respect, by the way,
That's so
but I
important.
don't think a lot of tournament organizers who do local stuff understand that, because their complaint of every time you plug in a new controller, you might have to reset the game. That is real. They're
Yeah,
not
that's
making
real.
that
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is common problems that we have at tournaments. One of the things is
Yeah.
actually having to restart the game. So with these types of setups, you can you don't have to restart the game. So you don't have to restart the game, and like that's huge. You don't have to change any of the sound inputs because again, it pretty much functions. It designed to make it Windows function like a console. Or it's like you just plug and play, quick swapping of inputs, no
So the
restarting the
wingman
game.
basically just tells the computer, here is controller one, here's controller two,
Yes,
and then it
as
cuts
simple.
off everything on the other side, and the
Yes, cuts off
wingman
everything.
itself handles pairing the controllers.
Yeah, so you can't even pause, which is good for tournaments. You don't want to pause.
Great.
All right,
So that
great.
way controller swaps will not mess up the games at all.
Yeah, controller swaps don't mess up the games at all, and it's just a plug and play experience. Like obviously, sometimes like with the wingmans, they're not like 100% perfect, so it requires situations where sometimes I have to unplug and replug the adapter, but that's fine.
So you got yourself Brook Wingman, and now you've loaded up the FGCOS, but what else is this doing? Right? So is it uninstalling stuff? Like what else is it doing?
Like so pretty much has a ton of security mitigations around, right? So basically, so basically has a ton of Windows mitigation. So it's tweaking the registry, it's installing like a bunch of PowerShell commands. It's nothing too crazy actually. It's just stuff that we've done. It's just stuff that's available elsewhere. It's just combining multiple tweak packages into one package. So
Okay.
yeah, so like, and then here's the thing. So once you have a tweaked OS installed, there's a couple of issues running tournaments. Number one, you don't want the players to change settings, right,
Right.
on Windows because that changes the latency, right? So I actually have modes where there's I have a mode that is tournament ready, meaning they cannot access any of the Windows commands while they're running the game, which is great. That's great because that's what you want because you want plug and play and you want them to not be able to change any Windows settings in a tournament environment. So
Hmm.
those are the specific tweaks that I'm going after to call FGCOS because like that's a specific problem for offline fighting game tournaments to actually run. Like by doing this, we're mitigating the fact that the player will be able to either A, modify the Windows or game settings, and B, plug and play, which is the biggest problem at tournaments. So now with this, we actually like a framework where we can actually run it and they can see the benefits of PC easily. So this is all
Okay.
that's all stuff that's pre-tweaked.
So quality of life function is a big part of it as well. Controllers.
Yeah, the quality of life is the biggest thing why I'm calling it
When you
FGCOS.
say players change settings, I also want everybody to know that that's not like that's not like a nefarious. Ooh, I'm going to go in and change a setting. Will be
No, no.
the match. If anybody's ever leaned on a keyboard before,
Yeah, you can change setting by accident. Yeah,
it's crazy. There are commands that are built into Windows, like Control Alt Shift Up or something,
yeah,
used to rotate the screen. So there was the first time that happened to me, I was like, what on earth just happened to my computer? Why is it in Tate mode? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And it was because I leaned on it and it hit that button combination. So, that,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, you described it perfectly because basically we have to protect the end user from itself. So I'll give you an example in tournament, and this only happened because I've been doing PC tournaments. So one common problem is, for example, right. So the way we had Defend the North set up, we had like 4 laptops on the side, and we had them all plugged into 165 hertz monitors, right? So like so,
nice.
so so the problem is one of the common problems is if for whatever reason you have to access the settings of Windows, you have to open the monitor, you have to open the lid of the laptop. So when it does that, it actually goes back to like clone mode. So then you lose the refresh rate, so you end up going back to 60 hertz. So basically, FGC OS mitigates things like that. Like just
Okay.
something as simple as opening the laptop can change your setting
Yeah.
in a tournament.
So you have settings locked down.
Yeah,
But where do the optimizations come in as far as reducing input latency? Because you and I have talked about this over the past year, and some of the stuff you told me, I was like, yeah, no, it's definitely what I found. But some of the other stuff you told me, I was like,
it's new.
seriously, that affected latency? Like, what are some of the things and some
In
of the tweaks that
Windows.
you did? Yeah,
Oh, like I said, it's not my invent. So it's basically a bunch of community tweaks you can all bring together. It's not something that I made specifically. The
but
only
you
part is
tested it all,
yeah, I
so
tested it all. I tested
yeah,
it all. I tested it all. So basically, here's some things that are pretty interesting, right? So first off, like certain versions of Windows are better for debloating and stuff like that, right? And second,
such as
yeah. Like if you go between Windows 7 to even Windows 11, obviously, as you go up in OSs, you can strip less and less out of the OS.
right.
Yeah.
But
As
you
a
can't run a lot of stuff on Windows 7 anymore. So
Yeah, so it's important to note this. Like when we're talking PC optimization, like once I explain it, I hope this explanation makes sense. So first off, as you and I know, but the viewers might not know, Windows is not a real time OS.
Mhm.
Do you think your audience knows what that means? So basically everything runs in a queue, so it's not in order, right? So
right.
like, it's not running at the same time, right? So basically, like the way this reduces input latency is if you debloat the machine and you shorten the queue, why wouldn't you have lower latency, right? Because not a
That's
real
an
time OS.
excellent way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense, right?
No,
So
that was a great analogy. Yeah.
um so once you remove all the things like in the queue, then it's like certain things built into Windows, like for example Windows Defender, like
Right.
Windows Defender, Firewall, and like for example Cortana, like they all add bloat,
Yes.
right?
Cortana adds so much bloat that since day one, that's like when I get a machine or when a friend of mine, or I can't tell you how many of my friends drop ship laptops to me so I can pre-configure it
Yeah.
and mail it back out to them. And that's the number one thing I do is disable Cortana.
Yeah, this is number one. This is the cool part about this blog because I've already had a top player review it, and he's just talking about his feelings. I can give you the more technical explanation of it, which would make sense when I'm explaining it to you. So anyway, so you have to remove like a lot of the Windows bloat. Did you actually know? Did you actually know that some of the mitigations? You remember Spectre and Meltdown a couple of years back? The
Yeah.
BIOS yeah. So like those actually add input delay.
Yes. Yeah. So I didn't actually know that, but
Yeah.
I when you say it out loud, it makes perfect sense because a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
the tweaks that they did in order to fix that
Yeah.
involve
Security.
scanning things in real time.
Yeah. I'm adding
Yeah.
security like adds overhead
Right.
basically. So like it's nothing crazy. So
And
yes,
I gotta pause you for a moment here because you mentioned the S word security. That's the other reason why I said learn my Clonezilla tutorial. It's
yeah,
super freaking easy and buy another hard drive. And
you
if
need to
you're
buy
really
how to
worried,
test it.
buy two at like
Yeah,
40, 30
exactly.
bucks each. So if you're worried about security,
Well,
install FGCOS on your machine on one drive,
yeah.
get that all tweaked up, or make sure it's installed, get everything
Mhm,
ready, and then do a Clonezilla backup of that to a file, and then keep
mhm.
it on two hard drives.
Well,
And
well,
that
well,
way,
well, well, the
I'm
thing
thinking about
is,
tournament
yeah,
organizers, by the way. So
yeah, you're
every
right.
time
Yeah,
you're done with one,
yeah,
just put the other one in,
yeah,
reimage the first one, and you never have to worry about security. Because what if it got infected halfway through the tournament? Who cares?
yeah. You can also,
You're
yeah,
erasing it.
yeah. You can just erase it and get back to stock in a couple of minutes, actually.
Right. So
So,
I
so,
just
so, so,
wanted to
so,
make
so, so
sure
like,
I paused about security because we're not telling people to run completely open, insecure
oh
machines.
yeah, no,
Only
no,
when you're in the middle of
no,
the tournament or practicing.
no, no, no. If you're in tournament mode, you can't change any settings. You can't even go to the menus.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Like so like that's perfect for tournaments. It's like they're not going online anyway, and you can't access the Windows settings, so it doesn't matter. It's specifically designed for playing games, though. It's like I'm not trying to like do like my daily everything on this, but
Right. Right. Right.
yeah. So also there's going to be options, to disable. You can enable or disable certain types of settings, like ones that you're familiar with. So the thing is with PC, although it is the lowest latency, one of the biggest problems right now is standardization of settings. That's the most important part that I want to get across, because like a PC's got like it's the lowest latency, but it depends on how well you tune your machine. And what I found out is that basically when it comes to latency, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Bob, every single component in your machine matters. Duh, right? Every single
Right.
component, every single setting, right? Like everything. Actually, everything.
Every component matters to a point, though. So if you still have a mechanical spinning hard drive and you go to an SSD, that's massive. But if you have a PCIe 3, 3,500 megasecond drive, and you don't need to jump to a PCIe 4 7,000 meg per second drive, that's
Mhm.
not really going to affect input latency in
Yeah,
those
it's not.
games.
Yeah,
But going with an old Celeron processor versus any newer i series,
yeah.
basic stuff makes a big difference. But
Oh
we're
yeah,
not talking about the
yeah,
difference between a $2,000 processor
yeah.
and a $500 processor.
Yeah, you're doing a great job keeping it in perspective. So I'm just spitting, and like you said the framework.
Cool,
We
keep it going. This is perfect.
Yeah. So where did I leave off before that? I was talking about what was the last thing I talked about?
We were talking about. You said how every single component,
Oh yeah.
software
Oh
and
no.
hardware,
Oh yeah.
matters.
So now I remember. So every single component matters, right? So it's like obviously you need to know your system up and down. You need to build it with latency in mind, and like basically like the four things. I guess the four things that affect latency the most. It's your GPU. So it's actually been tested, Bob, which is pretty interesting. It turns out that the 3090 and the 4090 series because they're using such low GPU overhead, they get less input latency overall. They actually get
Interesting.
latency gains. So now there's a reason to get 3090 for retro.
So just by going from 3060 to 3090, do you know about how much latency you're talking about?
Oh yeah, so like I took a picture of the chart. Um, I will tell you. I'll tell you. I have a picture of this. Just calling it up on my phone. I have the exact numbers, but it's enough for me to mention.
Mhm.
Um,
While you're looking, just shout out to Blurbusters
oh
for
yeah, shouts to Blur
being
Busters.
awesome and helping
Yeah,
us
Blur
all with
Busters is
this and
awesome.
just being a huge part of the community fighting for this stuff.
Okay, look, so this is a benchmark in Overwatch. Okay, so 1060 6 GB card, right? It takes 40. So there's latency. There's latency in game. This 1060 has 44.2 milliseconds of latency. When you go to a 3090 from a 1060, it cuts by a third to 12.5 milliseconds, and the 4090 latency is 8.7 milliseconds. That's pretty interesting,
Wow.
actually. Yeah, that's really interesting. Cause so now I
Do you
realize
happen to have one for 3060?
no,
So,
no, no.
okay. Because that was just kind of curious because I have a 3060 in here because I wanted the newest RTX features, but I don't do crazy gaming,
oh,
so I didn't think I needed the 3090. But
so
if
I
I'm
think
playing
the
retro, maybe that would have been a difference.
yeah, oh yeah. So this is one of the things I want to stress about FGCOS. Actually, the biggest latency gains, and I'm sure your audience will be happy to hear this. Like they work the best on emulators by
Nice.
far.
I was going to get to that. You know, I was going to get to
Yeah, yeah,
that.
by far. So emulation gets the biggest benefit from FGCOS because if you think about it, right? Like obviously, like our audience, like we all use Mister now. Mister's godlike, etc. Right? But so software emulation, I feel like the reason why there was one of the reasons why there was a big shift towards Mister is again people have random PCs and random settings. So it's like when you add an emulator on top of it, the emulator overhead, like you have all sorts
Yeah.
of delay that you don't even know where it's coming from.
Right.
So basically with these with all these tweaks, it's like we can save. So on my setup, actually Blurbusters, yeah, shouts to Blurbusters. He wrote this specifically. So I'm receiving a 30 ms latency drop like on emulators with my specific setup, which is 390 hertz FGCOS.
That is exactly what I love to hear. And
Mhm.
that was always such a big argument with me because it's so easy for and I obviously dropped the nerd bomb with love, but it's so
Yeah.
easy for a nerd to say, "Oh, well, I could build a PC that's just as good as Mister." Yeah. How much time are you spending doing that?
Tweaking. Yeah.
What happens to your software configuration when you install Adobe reinstalls, Photoshop in the background without telling you, and now it changes some default Windows settings? How
Mhm.
much did you spend on the hardware to do that? It's like, yeah, if you take it out of context, sure, software emulation could be just as good as Mister. But if you put it in the context of you load up an SD card and you start playing,
Yeah.
I
You have to
mean,
start playing.
there's no contest. I do love software emulation, though. I always have. My first website in the 90s was about
Mhm.
that. And there are things you could do with software emulation that you could never do, even on the current version of the
Yeah.
Mister.
Exactly.
So
Like
this is
software
the
emulation.
perfect medium ground right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, software emulation has its place, and as always, as you know, like I'm on RetroRGB, so I'm a real hardware guy first and foremost. I'm not showing my picture of CRTs in the background, but Bob's been to my house. He's seen all the massive.
Art's got a good CRT collection.
Yeah,
He's
no,
legit.
it's CRT collection. Yeah, like so I just got the XM29 a couple of months ago, so I finally got to see the last part of the Holy Grail. So I've seen the D32, the NEC XM29. What's the third Holy Grail monitor? Is it the Sony FW900? I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I think that's it. But
That's it.
the D24 and the D32 are basically
The
the
same.
D24 is the same. The only difference is the FW900 could handle more PC
Yeah.
resolutions.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. Well,
about it, though.
yeah. It's about well. Actually, with the D24 and D32, the difference comes down to the scan lines.
Hmm.
You see how different the scan lines are on a D24 compared to a D32. It's a different look.
It's for anybody that most people have not seen these in person,
No,
but
they're not. They're
I'm
not.
sure people have seen a 14-inch CRT and a 27-inch CRT, and it's the same thing. It's just you have more lines jammed into a closer space, so it's a different look.
Mm,
One could argue it's better or worse. I don't really care. It's different though.
yep.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. But yeah, back to FGCOS. So basically, this is just cutting down like a bunch of overhead, and the goal behind this is, since I grew up playing CRT first and foremost, so all I'm trying to do is bring the delay back down to CRT level. So we can do this with software tweaks now, which is amazing. It's basically like you have to tune your hardware.
So one of the things I've been wanting to ask you, and I was kind of saving it for this because I wanted to
Yeah.
ask this question fresh,
Yeah. Go
is,
ahead.
and we'll bounce back and forth between this, but for people that have gamed on CRTs and they understand what we're talking about with the latency, when you start doing things like you run it on a PC, which means you have a lot more options than your average game console, and
Hmm.
then you run it, a tweaked FGCOS like this one, and now you're running it in 240 hertz, let's just say. How does that feel compared to a CRT? And you've shown me the demos, but
Yeah.
what do you think is a good way, or how do you think is a good way to explain the difference to people?
Oh, like so there's actually like a lot of good video links on this. You can go to NVIDIA's site, right? Like you can go to NVIDIA's site, just look up any of the videos like about 500 hertz monitors, and like they'll show you the difference. They'll show the same frame, and they'll show like 60 FPS. It'll show 60. It'll show 60 hertz, 144, 240, and 480, and it's pretty easy to see the difference. Like basically, like a faster monitor draws the frame that much faster, so you have more time to react. Basically, pretty much. But in terms of in a technical sense, right? So this is how. So this is how it makes it better because the OS is already pre-tweaked. Again, you're not dealing with a lot of the PC overhead that comes with running the operating system. So you get more to the bare metal, as say so to speak. So it's not magic, just removing like a lot of the bloat in the way that's actually causing input lag.
So I guess so. What I'm trying to do is explain
Yeah,
what I would love to see. All right, so let me back up for a minute. What I would love to see is a demo at an expo somewhere. Maybe we can get
yeah,
you up to Retro World Expo or something.
yeah.
And I want there to be a line. People could queue up, and I want three stations, identical hardware on all three, except machine in FGCOS on all of them too. Let's just only talk about refresh rate and tweaks. But the first one I want 60 hertz.
Oh
The
yeah, sorry.
second one, I want 240 hertz, 480, whatever you could do, the fastest one you could come up with. And then the third station, I want back to 60 hertz because I don't. When you first had me do that, we played 60 hertz first. And I was
Yeah,
like,
and
oh,
then
this feels great. It's a great setup. And then you had me play, I think it was 240, and I was just like, wow, this is nice. This like I could absolutely notice a difference. But the much much bigger difference was when I went back to 60, and you were like, try it on 60 again, try it. And
yeah.
that for me, that was the bigger difference.
Oh,
Like holy
yeah,
shit.
look at my screen. Look at my screen.
Yeah,
I have the NVIDIA smoothing tracking. So look, so you can see right here, and now basically 144 hertz is the standard. So you can see
yeah.
on a 500 hertz monitor, you can see the speed difference right there. That's actually
Oh
real.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
And
actually
while
real.
you obviously can't see individual frames,
Yeah, you
the way
can't.
your brain processes data, you
You
could
see the
feel it.
keyframe faster. Exactly.
Yep. So it's, and I think one of the ways that, it says minimize ghosting effects. I think that's kind of one of the reasons why having a faster LCD is going to be necessary to compete with CRT latency, because
Yeah, yeah.
even if you use high speed cameras and digital sensors to measure, yes, you could get LCD panels that are 1.5 milliseconds of latency, but it doesn't feel that way because of motion blur and
Yeah,
because of black
exactly.
levels. So you
Correct.
need the faster refresh rate to compensate for that. So yeah, that's a good demo for anybody listening audio only. It's the faster the refresh rate, the less the blur. Go to Blur Busters and check out their demo for that. It's the
Yeah, it's
alien
amazing.
spaceship thing. That is the go to, absolutely, to demo this stuff and to see the differences.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, so basically, what I'm saying is, you basically need like a. Here's where we're at now, like refresh rate wise. So basically, you need a 500 hertz monitor. Like when you get to around to that level, you actually have like CRT level latency, right?
Mhm.
You actually match it, but the look isn't there. That's why Blur Busters always says, once we get to 1,000 hertz, then we're gonna see the input latency. We're gonna see not only the input latency, but the look of CRT match. So we're still a little bit away from that. I think they're up to a 700 hertz monitor now, so we're getting close, Bob.
Yeah.
We're actually getting really close.
And I think when it comes down to the really nerdy details, which I don't think I'm smart enough to get into this, but
Mhm.
resolution to refresh rate does matter.
Oh
So
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah. Correct.
1440p monitor at 500 hertz might actually be perceived the same as a 4K monitor at 1,000 hertz or something like
Yeah.
that.
So
So
it comes down to bandwidth limitations right now. So the way things are set up, right now, HDMI 2.1 is the standard, right? So I think the bandwidth limitations for that is it comes on the bandwidth limitation. So I think HDMI 2.1 is you can do 4K 240 hertz right now, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So DisplayPort 1.4, which is what I'm using like for my current setup, right? Is actually has 390 hertz as the limit, 390 to 400 hertz. So I think that the monitors are coming out, they're either DisplayPort 2.0 or HDMI 2.1 monitors because of bandwidth. So with HDMI 2.1 monitors, like the spec actually has 1080p 500 hertz. That's
Pretty
actually in
cool.
the standard. So it makes sense why the monitors are coming out now because now there's HDMI. They're using the bandwidth limitation of HDMI 2.1.
A lot of monitors that are the faster refresh rate, that
Yeah.
are the more affordable ones, only supported over DisplayPort
Yeah,
because they don't have
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the one you sold me, the Z's work, the one that sent me down this rabbit hole, it was a dual DisplayPort 480 hertz monitor, but because of bandwidth limitations, it's DisplayPort 1.2. I can only get 540p at 480 hertz. So I'd actually upgrade to this panel just because that's 1080p.
I still feel a little bit bad about that. I contacted Zeus. Here's the short version for anybody. I contacted Zeus and was like, "Hey, I think we need this for retro." And he's like, "It's not designed for retro. It's probably not going to work."
It's
Like,
great
well,
it's so great.
I'm going to buy one and try to make it work. And then I spent a year complaining to him about how it didn't work for retro, and he was basically like, "No shit."
Yeah, no shit.
It's the first thing I told you. So I was like, "All right, Art, why don't you use it for PC?"
You really expect, but the thing is, though, even though it wasn't meant for retro, that one capture you got of Super Turbo was ridiculous because it shows the benefits. Like when you play that monitor in 40 hertz mode, you really see the benefits of it for retro.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I ended up that now that monitors with Art, and he's using it for the correct way that it was supposed to be designed. That it is funny and awesome.
But like I said, like I didn't originally think to use it for emulators, but like I said, when I use it on emulators, I get a big gain. Like so the RPCX3 emulator has made like a lot of progress recently. And as we know, PlayStation, because of the polling rate of the controllers and the fact that VSync is on PlayStation 3, it's inherently like a laggy console. So using a tweaked Windows OS with an emulator, assuming controller overhead, right? You have a tweaked OS, it actually mitigates that. So it's actually a pretty good experience. I was very surprised.
So could you explain your interpretation of why VSync slows things down? Because I've heard it explained a few different ways, and it's hard to get through to people sometimes.
Okay, so like I hope my explanation makes sense. I'm a little bit nervous because you've apparently asked me a lot of people this. All right, so I'll try to explain it. So the way VSync works is it draws. So you're playing a 60 frame per second game. Each frame, follow me here, 16.6 milliseconds. When you have VSync on, it draws that 16.6 milliseconds at the very end of the frame. At the very end of the frame, rather than the first part of the 16.6, it draws it like at the last part, which is like 15 or whatever.
For the purpose of making sure
that's
of
smooth.
What? That's smooth. There's no judder going between.
So when you're playing on 60 hertz and VSync is off, your monitor is spitting the frames as fast as the display can allow it. So like that's why there's tiering. That's why you get the visual tier.
Okay, so for people that don't really play on PCs but they're into retro scalers, it's basically like adding a frame buffer.
Yeah, basically.
So it's all right.
Adding a frame buffer, yeah. It's basically so when you remove the frame buffer, so in 60 hertz you get a visual tier, but as you go up in refresh rates from 60 to 144 to 240, because the monitor is refreshing so much faster, that visual tier becomes gone.
Well, but isn't it also with FreeSync and all that other stuff? Doesn't that completely eliminate the need for this because the monitor will just refresh at the rate that at whatever it's being sent?
So G-Sync and FreeSync, it basically gives you the benefits of having VSync on with the benefits of high refresh monitor. So it's the best of both worlds.
Right. So you don't need that buffering because it just dynamically adjusts to whatever frame rate it's being sent.
Yeah.
So you don't have the video juddering in front of you, but you also don't need the buffer to get that.
Exactly. So I find in fighting games, like I've tried to play with FreeSync on and just raw refresh rate. So I find because I'm at such a high hertz, because I'm playing on my 390 hertz monitor right now, because I'm playing at such a high hertz, I don't get like that judder. Mm-hmm. But then when I turn on FreeSync, it's very smooth and I still get pretty good latency. So I can't tell which one is better right now. They're both really good options. To say the least.
So let's talk hardware now. So I'm not talking about the latest, craziest games. We're not getting into the stuff that Digital Foundry reviews. I'm talking about people who are into fighting games. It's something that, I don't even think I realized how
low spec.
how low, when I say low spec, I'm going to say that in quotes, right? Because I'm not talking about running it on your cell phone, but like how low of a spec machine you really need in order to have a good low latency experience. So, like, what do you think is the hardware out there now? You know, we've already said, you know, the faster video cards are lower latency. So, of course, if you could afford a 4090, fine. But,
Mhm.
you know, let's say you got a 3060, right? And what else would you need? Would you need an i7 processor? Would you need, you know, an i3, i5, the AMD
Yeah, like
equivalent?
yeah. So again, like there's four things that benefit the latency. One is GPU, two is CPU, three is your OS, and fourth is like your RAM. So so what was the question again? So like the lowest common denominator. I was looking at I had like a chart of like some of the cheapest GPUs
Hmm.
in the $100 to $300 range that I was trying to call up. But basically like I think you can build a machine for as low as maybe to get all settings like what do you think like 240 hertz 1080p like I'll shoot for that bar.
Well, you know what? Let's pause this for a second. What's the slowest, you know, in quotes,
Yeah,
monitor people could get to really see
144
the
hertz.
difference?
144.
144.
Yeah, yeah, because like so the biggest latency jumps are from 60 to 144 and
Okay.
from 140 to 480 hertz.
So 480 is still going to be out of most people's price
Yeah,
ranges.
yeah.
So let's just say they go out
144,
and get a
they get a huge jump.
144 hertz monitor, which are not expensive, by the
Not
way.
expensive at all. It's like 120 now.
Yeah.
They're so cheap.
So you go out and get, or you have a 144 hertz monitor. Um, what are the specs to support that you're talking about? You know, price range, not
You can do
including the
that. Oh
monitor,
yeah,
just the PC
you
itself.
can do that. I think you can do that with like a GTX 1070 Ti. You can get
Wow.
144. You can get 144 1080p for fighting games.
Huh.
Yeah,
So
which
you're
is pretty
definitely talking under $1,000 then for the PC build.
exactly.
You're probably talking under $1,000, including the 144 hertz monitor at
So,
that point.
so not including the 144 hertz monitor, I think a price range of 500 to 600 is fair.
Wow.
Mm,
Wow. I mean, that's huge, right?
yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
Huh.
So if you actually want a game on a budget, it's quite possible. And again, it's fighting games. It's not like you're not playing the AAA title.
Right.
So again, so with fighting games, so one of the reasons why they're so demanding, like let's take like one of the anime fighting games for example. For example, Guilty Gear.
Mhm.
Guilty Gear is a game where it does not have a lot going on in the background. So you're just seeing the two characters go back and forth. So how much GPU utilization really is that? Except for
Yeah.
games like Tekken, Tekken obviously takes a little bit more.
When you say a little bit more, I mean, are you talking, you
That
know,
has 3D
twice the
backgrounds.
power or?
Yeah, yeah. I would say maybe like one third more the power because that game has a lot going on in the background.
You know, it's still interesting though, because if you put it into perspective, right? Somebody who does not have a game console or has one that they know they, you know, need to upgrade, right? They're still on PS4 or something like that, but they
Yeah.
also need a computer.
Oh
And
yeah, exactly. And you can buy an Intel i5 for pretty cheap these days. You can get them for like
yeah.
130, and like that'll be good for latency.
Well, I think a lot of people might still have the mentality of, oh,
The
I can
latest and
get a
greatest.
decent PC and a, you know, a PlayStation 5 for less than it would cost for a fighting game PC, and that's just not the truth at
Yeah, no,
all.
yeah, definitely not the truth. So I have the chart now. So I'm looking at
Okay.
GPU options in the $100 to $200 range. So the lowest that I would recommend is a 1660 Super, and that's around $180 to $220. Like
Wow.
yeah, it's about that's pretty cheap, right? On the high end of it, the $300 ones. So for a $300 one, you can get a 3050 at 270 to 300 or an Intel Arc.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, Intel Arc is actually 290 to $300.
I didn't realize that. I thought they were more. Huh.
No, it's not, and they have great AV1 encoding. So
Yeah, to be honest,
yeah,
the only experience I have with that is Epos's videos, Eposocks. So
yeah, like
I've never
he,
actually tried one myself.
yeah, he did a review. So recently, obviously with the Intel Arcs, those are newer. So I heard the last couple of drivers have been really good. So I'm thinking about getting one now because I wasn't worried about it for the encoding performance. I was just worried about the 1080p performance for gaming. But now with these new drivers, like yeah, I might check it out again. So anyway, basically what I'm saying is there's a lot of options. There's so many options to get hardware that runs high refresh for not a lot of money. Like that's the dirty secret. It's just the problem is again, like you're dealing with tinkering, so you have to do optimization. But you can make the most out of that hardware.
So FGCOS, is that something that's is it public beta yet, or is it something you're still just testing
So
behind the
so
scenes?
so, so like so here's the roadmap for it, right? So obviously, FGC's been doing like a lot of moves to PC. So right now the roadmap is so. First off, I'm giving it to top players because I've already explained to this channel the technical details of how it's going to work, but I need top player feedback, right? So I need to send this to top players to have them use it in their training environments, use it for net play, stuff like that, like, and see the feedback. And also, I need to give it to certain tournament organizers. I'm going to start doing this at Arcade Brooklyn. I'm going to have all the PCs install FGCOS and start running tournaments that way, and then see how the workflow goes. But yeah, like that's the plan. That's the plan for right now. I do plan to give it away at some point, but I want to get the tweaks to a working state enough where you don't have to do too much tweaking. So currently I'm in the alpha stage, so I'm doing like a lot of tweaking, installing it on different setups, stuff like that. So I'm doing like a lot of debugging right now. So it's gonna take a couple of months, but
Funny
it's
to
gonna
hear
take
you
a couple
call
of
it the
months.
alpha stage, because public facing, you're right, but like
Yeah,
you've got years into this, so
yeah. I
it's
put the
funny to hear you
previous
call it
time.
alpha. But from a public standpoint, yeah, you're right. It's still an alpha.
Mhm.
When you just mentioned that, something just kind of hit me. Right, I've been discussing PC setup and alternate hard drives from the point of view of a person at home who wants to use their computer to do multiple things. But
Exactly.
you just mentioned Arcade Brooklyn, which is obviously one of my favorite spots, but they don't use those PCs for other stuff. They use those
For
PCs for
tournaments.
gaming,
Yeah,
for tournaments,
it is
for
for gaming
yeah.
and tournament.
So taking the time to just set the reset Windows back to 0, install FGCOS, do a backup, Clonezilla backup, put a label, PC number 4, and then you save the PC Clonezilla backup as PC number 4,
Mhm. Yeah,
March 2023 or whatever else, and that actually would benefit them, because unlike me, who would use my PC for multiple uses and then would want to go back to having my fully loaded PC, like that's less crap that they would have to deal with. And if they ever have any issues, restore from the backup, which it's like 4 minutes, by the way. If you know how to, if
yeah,
you just got your
y-
boot from USB stick, you have the image on
yeah.
it.
It's so fast. It's so
Yeah,
fast, actually.
because
It's like
remember, you're removing the bloat, so you're not backing up a 60 gigabyte image. You're backing up a 7 gigabyte image.
at
So
most. Yeah, at most.
yeah,
It's actually way smaller than 7 gigs.
that's funny. So while I was talking at the beginning of this from the point of view of multi use, people who only buy these computers to
For
run these
games.
tournaments on
Yeah.
and for gaming, this is actually going to be a help to that workflow, not a hindrance.
Yeah, because like I said, so obviously PC is the best platform for latency, but like with these developers, I guess what Windows is taking in mind is just like simple things like hot swapping of controllers. Sometimes these controllers don't have driver support, which is why we use the Brooks, right? And yeah, there's all these quality of life things that make it difficult to have a plug and play experience. So basically, the whole goal of FGCOS, besides lowering the input latency, is having a standardization on settings and getting Windows to a state where it's a plug and play system for tournaments.
Huh.
So it's kind of like big picture, but like more ghetto. So
No, I
that's the way to
think it's
describe it.
exactly big
Yeah,
picture, but this is really interesting. I definitely, I'm not sure. My time's kind of limited, but I want to make time to test this out. So I could be
yeah,
one of your alpha testers just privately. And I could also bring a different perspective, because I'm not good at playing video games at all,
yeah. But
but
you're,
I'm
yeah,
really
but
fucking good
you're
at being a
good,
nerd. So I
dude.
could
Like
cover from there.
your test is so important. You're really good at detecting lag, though. You don't have to be good
Yeah.
at the game. You're really good at detecting lag.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, right? When I play against you in video games and I lose because you're a better player than me, that's
It's fine.
awesome. I love it. I love playing. I love having fun. But when I lose because, a laggy adapter or HDMI adapter, a stupid pound cable, or my arcade stick, the buttons are old, like that enrages me, because it's not like you got to spend $1 million to have a
Oh
setup
yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
suck.
Yeah,
So that's the type of stuff that really bugs me. I want to lose because I'm playing somebody who's a better player than me, not because I
actually,
wasn't
yeah.
smart enough to figure out to spend the same exact amount of money and just buy the right hardware. So
Yeah, yeah, of course, and that's for sure. And when you have a fully tweaked machine, I want to keep it in perspective. So I also already mentioned the CPU, the OS. Having like having a fully tweaked computer. Not only that, but even the controller PCB you use is very important. The overclocking state of it or not, because when you feel the sum of all of these tweaks, it's like so one of the things like in video games when you're on a bad polling rate and you're on like a shitty USB device, you'll try to double tap. You
yeah,
double tap because like your inputs don't come out on time and you're thinking like, oh man, like right, I pressed that button but it didn't come out, but that's why. Like when
Yeah.
you have like a bad polling rate, it's like you're forced to double tap. So when you play on a clean PC setup, you no longer have to double tap. You're not gonna have fat fingers. If you got fat fingers, it's gonna mess up your execution because you're gonna end up pressing multiple buttons by accident, and everything comes out.
So
Yeah.
in your testing of PCs, when you have an unoptimized setup, is the latency variable or consistent?
So here's the thing. So PC is never consistent. You have to have the settings tweaked. So you need to have same setup, same hardware configuration, same GPU drivers, everything. So
Mhm.
like that's the problem with PC right now. Like you get latency benefits, but there's no standard.
So this is one of the things that I've been kind of trying to teach people, and I guess the best example is the RetroTink 5X. If you
Yeah, we
have
need a
it in the
standard delay. Yeah,
full
we definitely need a standard.
compatibility mode, you have
Mhm.
up to a frame of lag, and it varies between 0 and 1. And people very rightfully, not trolling, very rightfully have asked, "Hey, I thought you said variable latency is the worst. Why are you okay with this?"
Compatibility, obviously.
Well, no, it's because when you're talking about the maximum being 1 and the minimum being 0 and only a variable of 1 frame, most people couldn't notice that. But
They
if you're
can't.
talking about a variable of 0 to 4, that's huge. Like try timing your jumps in original Super Mario Brothers in the later levels. You don't need to be a pro gamer, you don't need to be a competitor. You just
Mhm.
try playing a
Yeah.
game in the later levels, and then you get shit like the pound cables where it's 3 to 7 frames.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah.
I when people say, "Oh, well, I beat the game with that, so it's going to have no latency." No, you're probably a really good gamer, and you
Mhm.
just didn't know it because you're playing on shit hardware. Try
Yeah,
getting on a
exactly,
good rig, and then maybe you'd want
exactly.
to compete after that. So, yeah, it's when
Yeah.
you're talking about some of the numbers that you were saying before
Yeah,
about
0 to
dropping
1 you
latency
can't
that
feel.
much, that's a huge difference when you're
Yeah,
looking at PC.
yeah, like so I think on FGCOS, and again, depending on hardware, because it depends on what hardware you have. Like I would say FGCOS would save anywhere to about 2 to 4 frames compared to your unoptimized setup, depending on
That's
settings. Yeah,
that's
so
pretty
that's
huge.
actually huge. That's actually huge, and obviously depends on your equipment. Like obviously, you have a 500 hertz monitor, you're going to see more gains than having a 144 hertz, and so on. That's why it's a variable number.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
exciting stuff.
it's so exciting, Bob. Like, and like I'm so happy that like we finally have latency to a playable state, in the modern era, and it affects retro games as well as modern.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you mentioned Brook before, so um, I um, let me just look up on the Mr. Add-ons latency sheet here. If anybody
you're in the
doesn't know
top
what I'm
10.
talking about,
You're in the top
just
10.
go to mraddons.com and click on the input latency sheet, search by Brook. Their wired controllers are averaging under 1 millisecond of latency, except the zero pi fighting board. That's
Oh yeah, so
1.7.
so it's also important to note that the Mr. Add-ons chart, it only assumes 1,000 hertz polling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I actually asked him. Like, what was up with that? If it assumes 1,000 hertz, and he says, yeah, the chart assumes 1,000 hertz polling only. So in 1,000 hertz mode, it's that good. Yes.
Well, what's the fastest speed you can get on a PC now?
So you can do 8,000 hertz. So it's interesting. Look up the DualSense. Look up the DualSense 5. So DualSense 5 is the 8,000 hertz PCB. Look up the DualSense 5 there. So basically, DualSense 5 is the least laggy first party controller. It's pretty good
Oh,
actually.
okay.
Look at their numbers for DualSense 5.
Yeah.
1.8, 1.6. That's pretty good.
It's not searching right on the Mr. Sheet. I don't know why it's not liking that, but
I'm gonna look at it right now. But yeah, like, it's about 1.6 to 1.8.
it's the PS5 controller, right?
Yeah. It's DualSense. It's called DualSense 5. All right,
I'm
so
not sure why it's not coming up. Sorry, everybody. I'll be quick with this.
um,
Maybe it's under Sony. It's probably just under Sony. That's why. All right. DualSense 5 wired USB. It's 1.8 milliseconds of
yeah,
latency
1.8.
at 1,000.
That's at
And
1,000 hertz polling. So obviously on PC you can over. That's one of the few 8,000 hertz PCBs. So keyboards and mice, they have 8,000 hertz polling, but there hasn't really been there aren't too many devices that do that yet, except for the DualSense 5. DualSense 5 is actually an 8K hertz PCB. So I give
that's
Sony props on that controller.
that is pretty cool. I was so interested because Brooks boards have always performed well for us,
Yeah,
but
Brook is 0.7, so you're getting like a half frame advantage on the Brook.
the rep that I talked to, when I started asking them what their measurement numbers were, they were like, "We don't know." like, you have to know. You have some of the fastest boards out there. And they're like, well, you want to teach us? I'm like, you want to fucking pay me? Like, you're a big company. Are you serious? You know, you want me to just
I
no.
don't know
So
what they
yeah,
I don't know what they have in their components to make it such low lag, but I found with almost all of their adapters, everything it's like. So here's the thing. So now I'm getting to a point where players have placebo, where it's like it's a weird dichotomy we're in because now you would think that we want like zero lag everything, but then when the players get there, they're like, oh man, like is the adapter going to add any input lag, or what do I do when it's not lagging? It's so funny.
yeah.
That's so fun. They don't know what no lag was like, Bob. They don't play retro games, so like they actually didn't know.
I loved that video that was
I
posted on
love
social media when you were after one
Jack God.
tournament. You brought a bunch of people back to your setup, and they're like, "It's too fast.
We're too
Arturo's
fast.
setup's too fast. I can't do
I
it."
can't do anything, right? But basically like so. And another thing that's good for us retro gamers is when you play on a setup like this, it's like you feel like for a second because there's no lag, you're like, wait, I'm not too old. The game just got laggier.
Well, it's funny too because a lot
It's so
of
funny.
younger people have contacted me, people in their early 20s and stuff, and I'm like, I'm always kind of wondering, like, how did you get into this? How did you even know it? Because, like, you know, I've always been the person that likes everything, right? You know, I
Yeah,
love the album that came out yesterday, but I also love albums from before I was born. I don't give a shit. If I like the music, I like the music. And I assumed it was the same way with video games, which is true. But there are a lot of people who start playing games and they start getting really good at them. And they start asking the question, like, how come I'm better on my friend's setup than mine? And then it's okay, well, TVs have input latency. Let's see what, you know, maybe my friend has a better TV than me. And they
Mhm.
start going down the rabbit hole and they discover retro and CRTs
And they're like,
because
well,
of latency. And then they play,
exactly.
you know, old school Street Fighter
And they're
on,
like,
you know,
wow.
on a CRT. And they're like, every time I do these moves, it's the same. Whereas on the modern console, on a laggy TV and a wireless controller, every time I do the moves, it's 1 out of 5. I'll, you know, it'll. So that's
Exactly.
why a lot of older or younger people have started into the older games. So it's
Yeah.
kind of funny that how backwards the video game world went for such a long time, and now we're finally starting to catch
Y-
back up.
Yeah, they prioritize graphics too much because like I blame PlayStation One, even though PlayStation One's an amazing system, right? Like it did go away from the sprite based games that we're all used to from the arcade era. So obviously, start experimenting with 3D latency is going to go up, right?
Yeah.
And here we are now. But now we're back, baby, we're back. We're actually back to the old days. But also, it's interesting what you say about emulation. So I mean, if you think about it, yeah, the people that are in their 20s, emulation's been around, only for like 20 years. Video game emulation, like you think about it, like 2025.
You know, my website was back in the mid '90s, and you
Yeah,
certainly
so I was saying
couldn't
mid
get a
90s,
one-to-one thing, a
not
one
a
to
one to
one.
one,
So,
just
but
the emulation
you're
actually
right.
being the thing. Just the emulation
I
actually
would
being
say
the thing.
original Xbox was probably the first time people could really just jump in and play those older games and have a really, really good experience
Exactly,
without
exactly.
extra tweaking or a very expensive PC or something like that. So yeah, 20 years I think is probably a good number.
Yeah, so now to the point where like these kids they've grown up on these emulators and they're like, yo, how do I drop the lag maybe? Because like 'cause
Yeah,
they haven't played on real hardware yet. So like
yeah, that's funny.
that's the thing. So it's like I found with a lot of these kids like a lot of these people at tournaments that play retro fighting titles are actually in their 20s. So they've never played real hardware. So one time I had a Samurai Showdown 5 special tournament that where I brought my original Neo Geo and I brought a flash card to play on it, right? So they're sitting there playing, and because they played the console port, they're used to 3 punch macros. So like, but for them, it's a little bit of a different experience.
That's
you know,
funny.
that's funny. Yeah, it's funny. But no, like I mean that's the world we're in now, Bow. Like it's gotten to a point where like obviously 3D was a priority. Like input latency was not, but now we've been able to dial it back to a point where I feel pretty good like about the current state of hardware at the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do. Like especially, and now scale is starting to take advantage of it. So
it's
there's some
just
really exciting times ahead.
it's really hard talking about this stuff publicly because
Yeah, you can't say certain
our
things.
our intention is to be the best fucking nerds we possibly can.
Yeah,
That's our intention. That's it. Period. However, we inadvertently step on people's pocketbooks when we do that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we talk about, and I never in a million years would have guessed that I would get death threats and hate mail for telling people that the SCART to HDMI adapter that was designed for DVD players and VHS players is not good for gaming. Like
Yeah,
I never would have understood that, but you're
I understand
challenging
it.
people's budgets and their intelligence because somebody thinks that, oh, I figured out how to connect an old console to a new TV.
Yeah,
I'm great. I'm going to tell everybody. And then I come along and I publish, just basic numbers telling them how bad it is. And it's, oh, who the fuck do you think you are? Fuck you. You're not better than me. Well, I didn't think I was before, but kind of do now because you're wrong. And it's
yeah,
kind of, it's funny to
Y-
see this. And it's funny
yeah.
to see
No,
the people that get upset about it.
yeah. No, I understand. So like in that perspective, I have the unique benefit, and not everybody has this privilege of actually understanding latency and also being a top player in these games. So obviously, when I'm
Yeah.
playing the game like at a
You
high
just won
level,
a tournament again.
yeah, I want to tournament again on FGCOS, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, if I'm playing the game at a high level, if I see any lag, I'm gonna feel it right away. Like I'm literally gonna feel it like right away. Like any frame drop, anything.
That was one of the most interesting things when I started to get really nerdy with you and with Tech and with
Yeah,
Beast. For anybody that doesn't know, Beast's been on the channel before. It's been hard to nail Tech down. I'll get him one of these days. I got to hang out
exactly.
with him the other day, but he's top Chun Li players for Street
Super
Fighter,
turbo. Yep.
like probably top 10 in the world,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's being
Technically, really good.
conservative. So talking to him and you about latency, and both of you have very in-depth knowledge of how these things work. It confirms what I've been finding, even
Mhm,
though I'm a shit player at all games. And it
mhm.
was really awesome to hear all of you talk about these things because I kind of had a sense of what I was talking about, but I
Yeah, but you
really wanted to
confirm.
make sure that I had players that were top level to help figure out if I'm on the right path. And it turns out all of us separately have been finding the exact same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. So it's true. So that's why I've been giving FGCOS to the top players because obviously they're not computer savvy. But when I hear them like talk about the game, then like it makes total sense. Like they talk things like about being able to see keyframes faster, being able to defend better, being able to move faster. Just
Yeah.
simple things like on a controller, you're walking and blocking. That's huge. That's huge in a low latency setup.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you can walk and block, like you feel like that instant response. So like it changes everything. Actually changes everything.
And when we're talking about stuff like this, and we're talking in the context of tournament organizers, I don't want to speak for you, but I will absolutely boldly speak for myself when I say
Mhm.
I'm almost never telling anybody you're wrong, your equipment shit. I'm almost always just simply saying, hey, you probably already have all of the same equipment that you need. You just need to make sure that certain things are set right. Check your cables. Sometimes, all HDMI cables
Yeah,
look the same. If you bought an
yeah,
HDMI cable
exactly.
15 years ago, you might actually be having issues with 1440p stuff.
Yeah,
And the only people that I make fun of, which, anybody that's seen my live streams know that I make mistakes all the time.
yeah. We do
I'm
make mistakes
fine
all
with
the time
that.
on stream. Yeah,
However, if you're running a tournament and you have a PC with a decent graphics card and you have a bunch of 144 hertz monitors and some are set to 144 hertz and some are set to 60, you're kind of an asshole. So
yeah.
it's not, it's zero money, zero.
So here's the thing. So like I'm actually gonna put the heat off them for a moment, so I can say because I've experienced this with the same problem you're describing. This is all due to Windows settings. It's like Windows is not meant to be used in these types of environments. I don't think they considered this in mind because
Yeah.
now, like again, like something as simple as again, you're playing on a laptop. You close and open it. It's cloned 60 hertz.
Right. I want to make sure that I'm clear
Yeah,
about that. That
yeah, exactly.
example that you just gave is
Mhm.
not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Somebody takes the time to make sure that all these PCs are perfect. And by the end of the tournament, 1,000 controllers are being plugged in, a laptop's closed and open. That's not what I mean. That's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. That's totally
Yeah, yeah,
fine. I just mean the people that have that pompous
exactly.
attitude of like, screw you. I run tournaments and I know what I'm doing. And it's like, do you though?
No, you don't. So I can say this because I did. So now I can talk to you now that I've done like an all fighting game major. So I can talk to you like the pitfalls I ran into running a tournament. So when I say run the tournament, I didn't actually run the tournament, but I did configure the computers with a couple of guys' help. So and I think I think the event had like about like 700 to 1,000 entrants across all the titles. So it was a
Nice.
good use case. It was a pretty good use case. So anyway, so what I found is the biggest thing I was running around, I was running around making sure I basically taught my optimizations like about 6 tournament techs on the floor. So we had like
Mhm.
about 6 or 7 techs, and they were all running around debugging any issues. They knew how to solve common issues. Like for example, I plug in my controller to a Brooks adapter and like it doesn't work. What do I do to power cycle it? Stuff like that, right? So these are all things that actually save time in the tournament because again, the whole goal of this is to not exit the game and restart or not have to change any of the monitor settings. So I was always running around making sure that they were doing their job and making sure the monitors are all in 144 hertz mode. And like for the most part, like it was an experiment, but for the most part, the amount of techs I taught it to, which was about 6 to 7, they did an amazing job of making sure all the settings were standardized. So it was great. I wish you could have been there, Bob. It was great.
Me too.
It
Yeah.
was great.
And
The only hiccup I had actually was so during Street Fighter Top 8, like the time where everybody's watching, somebody in the back kicks a cable and the game gets interrupted, but it wasn't due to the OS, so I was happy. We
uh,
figured out that like it was actually a production issue by totally by accident, by the way. So in the end, all the PC haters that were waiting for the thing to crash mid screen or show like a Windows blue screen mid screen, it didn't happen. So I'm happy.
that's awesome.
I'm happy.
Yeah. You know, uh, my jokes aside, right? What you just said about like you did 6 or 7 texts, you showed how to do this, and they got into it. They did a good job. That's most people, in my experience.
Mhm.
Like I'll make jokes and I'll say shit like that, but most of the people that I've talked to that are into this stuff, they want to know more. It's just unfortunately, it's like everything else on social media. The loudest voices are not the
Yeah,
majority.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
just the
exactly.
loudest, and everybody.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, people just assume they are, but so yeah, I'm only throwing shade at those
yeah,
Korolikian morons that think that they know how to run something.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
90% of the people out there are doing a phenomenal job and they're trying their best, and I think that they're appreciative of the knowledge that we all try to put out there to make it easier on them.
Oh
So
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I think you made like a great tech at these tournaments, Bob, because you're pretty good at remembering the settings.
oh yeah, I
You're
have
actually
to
pretty
be.
good at remembering the settings. And I think the best way to describe this for the retro RGB audience is like think of what I'm doing as dialing in optimized OSSC timings.
Hmm.
That's the best way to describe it. Like, because obviously there's a big difference between a generic image and like a Firebrand X OSSC optimized timings.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The only thing that I will say that I'll disagree about is that is that big of a difference in as a comparison. However, if you run your OSSC in generic mode, you still have a low latency,
That's
awesome
true. That's true.
experience. Whereas
That's
if
true.
you just load up Windows, install all the basics and play, that's a massive difference in your gaming
Oh yeah,
experience.
that's true. That's true. We do have to give props to OSSC because I keep forgetting, and Bob brought it up. The OSSC is a zero lag scaler, so
Yeah.
that's what
But
it is.
but if you're comparing the biggest difference between taking something that's already good and making it
Yeah,
that much more optimized, yeah, that's a perfect analogy. So
yeah. Like it's already something good already, and like I said, you can buy all the hardware, get it in a good place, but you do have to tune everything to get to a specific point. And like it's more so like the FGCOS, not really like an OS as you can see. It's a bunch of tweaks, and basically like I'm trying to get a discussion talked about with standards because I feel like in the future, like we need to come to a standard on delay. So the way things are right now,
that's a
so,
great point.
yeah, so the way things are right now is because I have an optimized setup. I'm actually so when I'm playing somebody on net play, assuming there's no delay on the net play itself, I actually have a frame advantage because everything is drawing faster in my setup, compared to the person I'm playing, right? So I actually have like an inherent hardware advantage. So it's going to get to a point where people will have to be optimized because
Yeah.
especially if net play tournaments are becoming more prevalent as the years pass because the latency's dropping. So it's getting to a good point now. We're going to see like a lot more net play tournaments, and then it's going to come down to how well your OS is tweaked.
It does make sense, right? Because
Yeah,
anybody that's ever been into racing, you can't just go into F1 and then put a 4 nitrous tanks in it and press the button towards the end.
yeah,
It's like there
exactly.
has to be standards. So I could completely understand and totally sympathize with somebody a tournament that says, hey, max refresh rate's 240 hertz. You can't have 500 hertz monitors and PCs in this because that would completely skew the results. But
Oh yeah.
what is the
So I
minimum?
can say,
Yeah,
yeah,
what are the
exactly. What's the
minimum
minimum?
settings? But that said, too, having any standards whatsoever is still better than none.
Exactly.
So, I'm really glad that you're all going down the road of talking about this because I think it's just, people are finally starting to realize it's not just how important these tournaments are to people, but the money involved in them too. You
Yeah,
have
it's starting to
big
get yeah,
sponsors doing it, right? Like imagine F1 or imagine any sport at all. Soccer, doesn't matter. Imagine a sport where everything is different every field that you play on. The balls that you use are different. The shoot, like, that's impossible. There's no way. And the money that would be lost, imagine a soccer team that's got $1 billion into it. A global team loses a match because they all, the other team got to wear better shoes than them, and the ball
Exactly.
was, deflated more or something. That would never happen, unless you're Tom Brady, but we won't go there. But like, it's, so I think having those standards in video games is very important now for tournaments. And it's just, it's exactly like any other sport, in that
Yeah, there you
you
go.
implement these things, and then that trickles down. So now everybody wants to start using these same parameters, because that's what they practice on, because they want to go
Exactly.
under the exact same that they're going to be in under a tournament.
So with this setup right here, so again, I'm playing in a net play environment. I'm playing on a 400 hertz monitor on an already optimized OS, and my entire settings are tweaked, right? So
Mhm.
not only does the game, this is Twitter clips, right? So it's not max quality, but not only is the game playing smooth, it's like it's providing a smooth net play experience, and I'm landing all my stuff on time in an online environment again. So basically, it feels lagless. It feels like I'm playing like right next to them. Like even the anti-airs that I'm landing with Sim and Street Fighter, those are like 15 frame anti-airs. Those are hard to do on reaction. That's a hard move to actually do on reaction, but like due to the low latency of the setup, the controller settings, the Windows settings, like I'm effectively removing like 2 to 4 frames of lag, so everything just comes out faster. It's just a smooth experience. There's no like I can show it to you, but you have to actually feel it. It's something you have once you
Yeah.
put your controller on it, and I was glad I was able to show Bob like high refresh Tekken to show him how that worked.
Yeah. Listen, if we
Yeah,
can get this thing sponsored, would you try to mark off the dates for Retro World Expo to do this thing, this
yeah,
demo
I
that I
want to do it
want
in
to do?
person. Yeah, yeah. If
Because
I do it,
I
yeah,
mean
let's do it
this
in
with
person.
all of the love in the world. You and I could talk to we're fucking blue in the face, and
Yeah,
unless
exactly. They
somebody
won't get it.
sits down and tries it, there is no amount of words that would replace how you feel. And once again, I need to stress, I suck at video games compared to all of my friends, and I noticed immediately. But once again, going from 60 to the higher refresh rate was definitely something that I felt. But then going back down to 60, I'll never forget that. So it's
Yeah,
something that I want people to understand,
yeah,
and maybe we could try to figure out a way to do it so we have a
yeah.
CRT set up next
Exactly.
to it too, so
We
people would.
we do need a CRT sub next to two. Basically, what I'm
Yeah,
saying is, I guess the last point I'll make on this is like, you basically need a 400, 500 hertz monitor setup with a perfectly tuned PC to replace 60 hertz CRT. 60 hertz CRT and 60 hertz flat screen are definitely two different beasts.
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, two different beasts. So with all of this, with my 500 hertz setup, I'm basically all the way back to CRT timing. That's the best way to describe it.
Maybe that's the setup. Maybe the carnival ride is a 4 stop. It's a 60 hertz and all the exact same equipment. Maybe we'll even use the same PC and throw a switch. I don't know. We'll figure it out to make it fair. But either way, station number one, 60
Mhm.
hertz PC. Station number two, high refresh rate PC. Station number three, 60
You
hertz
heard
PC
CRT?
on a CRT.
Oh yeah.
And then station number four, back to a 60 hertz flat panel PC thing. I feel like I
People
feel
feel it.
like that would be the ultimate. Like, this is why you people are so into fucking CRTs, isn't it? I get it now. Like, I feel like that would really change a lot of people's minds on both high refresh rate flat panels and CRTs.
Yeah, again, and like like a lot of this stuff was again, it's because I'm such a CRT head. Like I'm so thirsty for that CRT level delay. Like I wanted it so bad, like on flat screen.
Yeah,
I mean, so me personally, even though like I play retro, I do play modern too. So I'm willing to make the compromises on the look of CRT if the delay is there. But that being said, I have a 14L5 literally like right next to me, so
yeah.
I'm not going to CRTs anytime soon.
Yeah, no, we get it.
Yeah.
But I mean, to your point, many years ago, as much as you love this stuff, try carrying two 20-inch BVMs to tournaments versus two 144 hertz flat panels. Tell me
Yeah,
how your arms feel at the end of 3 tournaments for both of those, and you'll be bending over backwards trying to get flat panels working. So
actually, what's on my mixer? What's house in my mixer on top is my 20G1U.
oh, I love that one. Yeah,
I love that one. Oh man, but yeah, Bob. That's pretty much it. Thanks for taking the time to ask me about FGCOS. I hope I did answer a lot of technical questions because again, like I had one player reviewer, Perfect Legend, and his review was by feel. It wasn't like a technical breakdown. It was like about how it affects like his gameplay. I was
That's
able to tell you
yeah.
some more of the technical details actually of how of how I imagine it working and how it's not like in a releasable state yet. But it seems to me like a lot of people are asking questions about it, and the feedback I'm getting from top players is very good. So I hope I hope the top players do like it, and that we can basically spread the good word of low latency more, across all the platforms. Really,
Hell yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to do this. And I think I'll title this like, public reveal FGCOS or something, just to, I'll find a creative title to try to let people know, like,
Yeah,
we're
I
talking
don't even have a
about this
graphic for it
thing.
yet. I don't
Yeah.
even have a graphic for it yet. It's literally just been me talking. But
Well,
yeah.
Mason's going to be doing the thumbnail for this, so maybe he'll have some ideas. That dude's amazing. I wouldn't. I've said this so many times. Mason's not paying me to say this or anything, but you could always tell which thumbnails I make and which ones Mason makes, because his are the only ones that actually look good. So I'm sure he'd come up with a fun logo for you or something.
Oh yeah, I'm reading through Perfect Legends review here. This will give you an idea of what he's talking about, like gameplay wise, right?
Okay.
So he's talking about so look, so this is from his words, not mine. So he says latency tier list, and this is high praise that he says this. He says S tier is optimized PC, and then A tier is CRT, retro, and Mister. So I would say I would actually say playing on a 500 hertz setup with perfectly tuned timings, and again tuning the emulators to have lower delay than real hardware. I can see why you put this as S.
That's
But
that's pretty understanding. Or
yeah,
that's I can see that, especially because you're
eh,
trying to play a mix of old and new
yeah,
as
old and
well.
new.
So
Yeah, and of course, A tier and CRT. That's still the gold standard. Like that's never going to change.
yeah,
But then right below A tier, you see he lists Xbox Series X and PS5 120 hertz. So obviously, there's a difference between 500 hertz PC and playing on 120 hertz on console, right?
yeah,
And then like he talks about what it does. So he talks about like how it bypasses the lag, allowing you to experience the gameplay. You can see full animations, letting you react and defend better. And it's what you were saying like about keyframes. And even in terms of defense, he's saying things like random fast moves will be easier to defend against even when you're not ready. Your inputs are cleaner and more consistent. So again, he's talking about the polling rate. So this
yeah,
is all stuff that I can explain like in technical terms. So the fact that he describes what he's feeling is great. So look, he's talking about when he's optimized, defending all random projectiles, moves when I'm last second duck blocking on reaction. Inputs are clean. Moves come out only when I want, and I only drop combos that have a brain fart or legit mess up. Easier to defend versus offense because the screen is clearer, no more stutters during animations. You can see the full animation of something and react properly in time instead of having to guess or react ahead of time in interactions. Move and block becomes more effective, so that's walking and stopping. Movement in general is cleaner. Input delay is gone, so you can react as fast as humanly possible. So it's really good to hear a top player say that in actual gameplay terms, not technical terms like how we have on here. So you know,
yeah. Could you send
bridging
me the link
bridging
to
both.
that so I could put it in the description for everybody?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'll
Thank
definitely
you.
send you his link.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to catch up and do all this, because I've been wanting to do some kind of overview on this, but then I knew I'd mess it up. So just having you here to talk with me about it just made it fun and easy. So thank you.
Oh
It
yeah,
was,
for
it was, a,
sure.
it was a blast.
And then thanks for giving me a platform to actually talk about FGCOS. So again, guys, there's all like an idea in my head. So Bob kind of put me on the spot. We got a
No,
couple of beers, just let it rock. But no, like this is definitely the vision I have for low latency PC and fighting games. And I'm happy to do what I can to help push it forward.
awesome. All right. Well, I will be keeping everybody updated. Everybody in the scene, who does stuff like this knows me. So reach out in all the usual places if you want to be a part of this and test it, and I'll put you in touch with Art, and we'll figure something out. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of really good people out there that would
Yeah,
be a help.
if there's any like diehard latency nerds out there that really want to help us, it's like we could definitely use people like you because like literally like in my journey, it's crazy because when I talked to this about Bob last year, was again the monitor, the ZWorks monitor put me down this rabbit hole because I was playing on a 60 hertz flat screen, then I was playing on a 480 hertz unoptimized setup, and now I'm playing on a 480 hertz optimized setup,
Yeah.
and like the level of knowledge that I have now compared to like even a year ago is like amazing.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just getting
awesome.
better and better. It's getting better and better all the time.
Love this stuff. Absolutely love it.
Mhm.
All right. Well,
Yep.
thanks again, Art. I really appreciate it. We'll put links to where you can find you and everything else, of course, like always. And this
Mhm.
is the first of many conversations about this. I'll be showing demos, and we're gonna have other people in the scene take a look at it too, because I just this could be huge for a lot of people in all the best ways.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's definitely an exciting time. Thanks for having me, Bob.
Hell yeah, man. See ya.
Later.